Hey everybody, my name's Daryl Obert. Welcome back to Journey to VR. So this week I'm going to continue refining my environment. I'm going to be adding more graffiti into it, and I wanted to make the graffiti look like it was on the walls before the actual reality capture happened. So I needed to come up with a good way of lighting some texture mapped information and having it feel like it was actually part of that environment. I've been playing around with this for a little bit, and I think I've got something that's actually working quite nicely. So take the time to check it out. All right, so here we are inside of Photoshop with a photographic reference of what I'm trying to achieve. I want to put black and white graffiti all over my reality captured environment, but I want it to look like it's being lit by that environment. So you can see this is obviously very big blocks of color, pure black, pure white, but it's got a lot of the color from that environment mixed into it. And that's exactly what I want to get to with my workflow. So here we are checking out the pure black and white piece of graffiti that was made inside of Photoshop. And if we jump into Maya, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the end result and then how to actually get there. So what we've got going on here is obviously this is my reality captured environment, and we're just looking at the texture maps that were derived from the photogrammetry. So it's a pretty accurate representation of what the concrete wall looks like. Now we want to get that black and white graffiti on there and have it look as though it was part of the actual environment before we even started the photogrammetry process. So what we're going to do is just jump over to our hypershade window here. And I've got a layered texture already set up here to kind of walk you through a few different versions of the texturing. So what we've got is we've got our background texture, which is just the walls here. And then layered on top of that, I've got this black and white layer, which is essentially the Photoshop texture map just stacked on there. So it looks cool, but it's not totally accurate because it doesn't have any of the lighting contribution from the environment mixed into it, right? It's not really being lit by this scene. So it just looks like it's kind of overlaid or pasted on there. No, I have done a couple little things like added a bump map into it and added a little bit of specularity where just the paint is to kind of make it work a bit better, but it still doesn't totally look right. So the second version I have here called lighted is actually got mixed into it the environment lighting. So it's being lit by the actual scene, and you can see that it actually looks like it's now part of that environment. So it's a subtle change. I'll toggle between these two guys here. But it really does make a little bit of a difference. Having it being a little bit warmer over here, it sort of drops off in a slight gradient there, and it's being tinted by that environment. So it sort of just starts to work. So how did I get to that? Well, I used an image-based lighting workflow, and I'm going to show you two different ways of doing it. And they're both super, super cool using Arnold. So let's go ahead and we can just hide this guy. We're going to be concentrating in on this Journey to VR logo. So the first way that we're going to do this is by creating a sky dome, and into that sky dome I'm going to add in a light probe or spherical light map that John Tojak made for me when he was doing the reality capture. So he made some high dynamic range image light probes for me to use for exactly things like this, like lighting the environment or adding in reflection. So if we jump over to our hypershade window one more time and we drag and drop this HDR in to our color channel, pretty straightforward there, you're going to see, oops, didn't get that obviously this is that lighting probe, right? And you can see that there's that big bright light hanging out on the side, sort of blasting in from that J. So this is cool, and it's going to look good. The problem is because it's just this big spherical dome, it doesn't really know how close that wall is or how close that light is. It's a square wall with a flat floor. It's just kind of projecting all this information in from this spherical probe, which does a good job, but it doesn't do the best job for this example. So what we'll do is we'll render this guy out really quickly so we can get a sense of what this looks like. So this is the only light in the scene is this sky probe now, like the sky dome. There is no other lights in the environment. And you can see, it's tinting it. It's got a little bit of directionality to it here. You can see a little bit of a shadowing kind of happening underneath this U as it hits under the R there. And, it looks cool. It's definitely done a decent job, but it's not as accurate as we can get. So let me show you a second way of approaching image-based lighting, or a second way that I kind of came up with to approach image-based lighting. So let's just save this image so we can compare to it. And let's jump back into our perspective, and we're going to blow away that sky dome. We don't need that guy anymore. So what I want to do is turn on another version of my environment that's just called walls lit. And just for fun, we're going to turn on the staircase stuff too. So what this is a version that's got this shader assigned to it. So this shader is just the Arnold standard shader, and I've essentially tied into the emissive parameter this texture map, and I've turned the scale up to 1. And keep in mind that this is an HDR image, and then that HDR image has its color profile set to raw. So pretty standard workflow there. So here's where it gets kind of cool. you'll notice floating around my scene here, I've got these spherical placement nodes. John went through and he knew exactly where he put his tripod. So he basically recorded that information and then essentially made multiple lighting probes for me. So what we're looking at right now are the walls with this spherical based lighting probe assigned to it. So as I start to move this around in viewport 2.0, you can see, I'm changing the position of that projected texture or that projected spherical texture. So what we're doing is we're taking a spherical light probe and projecting it onto the actual geometry. Super, super cool. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to assign this to the details also. So we'll just say assign material to those details. So now what we've got is we've got, a really nice texture map that's high dynamic range in the actual shape of the geometry that's now going to basically light our journey to VR. And the thing that's kind of cool about this is, this lighting probe does a really good job of capturing this part of the environment. But look at what happens if we go over here to the stairs, at the top of the stairs. It's just all smeared across. And that's why I have multiple lighting probes. So if I grab these walls and assign lighting probe 3, that lighting probe, it's got a different color balance to it, but it's going to do a good job up here. So you can kind of mix and match between these different lighting probes. And you could use some layered texture or a layered shader and transition between these different lighting probes to make one giant Obert shader that covered the whole environment. Now for my demo, I'm just going to keep moving forward using just this one down here near Journey to VR because that's good enough for the demo. But that's basically the idea. We've now got high dynamic range information in the actual position that it was when it was the reality capture. So this is about as real as you're going to get. So this is super, super cool. So let's go ahead and jump back over to that perspective. We'll bring up our render view. We'll make sure that we've saved that image and we'll just re-render this guy out using now our geometry-based lighting. Essentially, we've made a high dynamic range geometry-based light. And I've got primary visibility turned off so that it's not visible in the background here, but it's super, super cool. So the end result looks relatively similar to the one that we did just using the Sky Dome, but it is a little bit tighter. If you look at areas like around the J here, as I flip back and forth between those two, you can see that the diffuse shadows, it's got a little bit more directionality. It just has a slightly different look to it. That you got a lot more diffuse lighting happening over here. Same thing kind of happening underneath all this areas. So it does. They're both using image-based lighting workflows. But the one that's got it based on the actual geometry casting that information or that lighting information down on it does to me just look more realistic. It has a better feel to it. So that is basically what I did. So the end result for me was I've got that image-based lighting stuff happening. I went ahead and just put a logo maker inside of here, which is essentially just a simple card that's got, it's got the graffiti piece on it. And I just basically rendered that off of my left view. So if I went to left view and we hide this guy and we just re-render this, you'll see that this is essentially what I did to generate that logo that's got the lighting information baked into it. And then I just layered that into my layered shader, my layered texture. So very straightforward workflow, but the little subtle lighting shift that you get to me makes it work and kind of grounds the shot, which is really what I wanted to have happen. So thank you so much for taking the time to watch Journey to VR. Hopefully you guys are enjoying it. If you haven't had the time to go to the area and go to the actual Journey to VR blog, please go there now. There's tons of articles that have been written that go into lots of other topics. So go check those out. Cheers, everybody.